3 years old, I remember waking up to a thunderclap. The world spun around me. I was playing outside. My mom's screaming, she's crying. I'd been gone for 2.5 hours' time. I had some weird things happen afterwards. I was 11 years old, and I ended up getting electrocuted. I had 6,000 volts go through my body. One of the girls that I knew, she had actually aged within a period of 1 year, 5 years. By the time I was 22, 23, I was seeing an accelerated form of time. A lot of these examples of oddities that have occurred have been a direct result of the emotional relationship that I have with a woman. But it's not always the case. Sometimes it's associated with anger. Where a good example is I ended up at 22 years old, my ex-wife I caught cheating on me. Hold on a second. I ended up approaching the two as she was actually away with him over at his place, or over at her place. I shouldn't say her place, her mom's place, while her mom and dad were gone for the weekend. Well, I ended up running up and catching the guy, throwing him against his car. And in that brief instant, I have two sets of memories. One where my fist actually ended up flying through and basically killing the guy. And the second set of memories that I have is basically my fist adjusting midair and at that point going through the window and basically smashing in the side of his window. Now, I'm glad, I didn't take the guy's life without hesitation. I've never been in a fight in my life, but I have highly charged situations. In that case, it was anger. Sure, it was associated to a woman, and women have been a pivotal part of my life. That emotion has actually caused a little bit more awareness, of my mental faculties and kind of what's going on with my head. I had gotten numerous jobs, started contracting consulting when I was 24, 25, worked for Microsoft, for Intel, and by the time I was 29, I was making really good money, $150 an hour at that point, and I actually got a couple gentlemen that approached me that asked me if I wanted to go into business with them. They had a business concept, they just needed a developer to take care of it with them. We opened up a company called Touchscape. That was back in 1999. We started having problems with hackers. So I ended up doing a lot of tracing. One particular night, we had just ramped up. We had gotten China Mist was one of our customers, and we had already had Ping on board. And we had a lot of their company's data that was on our servers, and our servers were being nailed from the outside. They had actually pierced our firewall and actually started acquiring information from internally. I'm spending a lot of hours up at night and everything trying to actually stop these hackers from doing this. I locate, backtrace the connection, and I traced it down to a house over in Phoenix. So at that point, I ended up contacting the FBI. I contacted Cox Communication. They were actually taking a hardline stance on hackers at that point, and they ended up going and arresting two males. And I had a really unusual call that happened at that point. And some guy saying he's representing the government, and he's well aware of my situation, what got me started at Orbital, and gave me information that just basically made it clear he had a lot of information about my past. So I reluctantly went and met with the gentleman. He was actually there at Old Chicago over in Tempe, Arizona, with the two gentlemen that had actually been arrested. They were actually, all three of them were employed. He was the director for the NSA, and those two of his workers were actually the ones that had hacked. They made me a job offer at that point, and I'm just like, no, I'm personally invested in this company. I'm not interested, in working for you. That's when they looked at me and they said, okay, now, we know that you've been hacking, and we know you've been doing this for several months now. Now, we're going to give you an offer. Either you're going to come work for us in the software department as a junior developer, we're going to train you there, or these men are going to take you away. At that point, I had one of two options: take the jail or job. And unfortunately, I took the job. Warren Buffett had actually hired me to come into Prudential on a contractual basis because he was interested in assuming control of the real estate and relocation division. So I was part of the team that was responsible for transitioning that division over to his arm. In about 2009, I started paying attention to the way assets were manipulated through options and through shorts. And I saw that Warren Buffett was actually causing a depression of the Prudential arm in order to purchase the property, basically purchase the division. I didn't like the way that he was doing this. So what he was doing was he was causing a rapid depression of the value of the of Prudential. So he ended up pocketing the difference, and at that point he took that difference and he ended up leveraging that difference to actually outright purchase the Prudential Real Estate and Relocation Division arm from the company. I didn't like that because it caused a lot of problems with basically the people that own the company. Didn't like the way the guy was doing business. I didn't like the way he treated his own employees. You're giving me below standard wages, for a CIO level position and everything. I'm just flat out not interested. So at that point, that's when I turned around and told him, respectfully speaking, sir, because he was the one that actually tendered the job offer. Respectfully speaking, sir, you can take the job and shove it up your ass. And at that point, I ended up walking out. Ended up packing my stuff into my car and took off back down to Charlotte. And, once I got down there, the whole way there, I thought, okay, I'm kind of worried, about this whole situation. I'm kind of worried about, my money now. Knowing who this guy is. I don't know who did it. All I know is I never had access to it. The money did ultimately disappear, and I never got access to it again. I left the country for a year with the intention of basically saying, screw this, I'm going to go to my place over in Guanacaste. Got to Guanacaste, place is owned by somebody else now. It happened like that. Hallucinations had persisted well before I'd actually started up the cocaine to begin with. I saw a Furby in the floor, and I thought I was a little bit tripped out by it. I had been working for the government at that point, so I took an extended break. And at that point, I ended up taking a trip through California, Nevada. I ended up seeing a completely nuclear holocaust Terminator world. And it's almost like the landscape shifted. I saw, as far as the eye can see, blown out mountains. I saw nuclear craters. The smell was absolutely horrid. It smelled like burnt skin. It felt utterly hopeless. Been trying to hitchhike my way out of this mess when I ended up running out of gas. So I ended up driving a car more towards Vegas, hoping I'm going to find a gas station in this nuclear holocaust land. And all of a sudden, car starts sputtering. I've got a Lexus. It's a Lexus 450 hybrid, and it's the electric is making me go farther than I can, but it's running out of gas, and I'm in the middle of the fucking desert here. I don't know what to do at this point. So at this point, I'm just like going, okay, and I'm just for some reason wanting to take my life. So I start looking at other cars, and I'm thinking, okay, if I hit a car head on at 100 miles an hour, that'll end my life, but I'm going to feel guilty. I know I'm going to feel guilty because I'm going to take their life too. So I didn't want to do that. So I ended up pulling over off to the side of the road, and here I am as I run out of gas, looking at this world, and I'm trying to thumb a ride, and every face that goes by is the same plasticky face. My car's run out of gas, I've got the lid up, nobody's stopping, everybody's avoiding me. So I sit off to the side, and at this point I pull out a Swiss Army knife, and at that point I ended up just taking it up my wrist. At that point I saw that I just didn't bleed. Ended up having somebody come out and pick me up out of the desert. I didn't understand what imagination can do and the power of imagination. I knew that I had caused it. I didn't know how to control it. I have every thought in the world go through my head now. Everything. I, as a programmer, have constructed a matrix around me. I define what's possible here and what's not. Now, as I'm emerging from my mortal existence, to this being that I'm becoming, I'm learning more and more the controls of the car per se, of being inside this body and how it actually interacts with this world. I've been setting up a future timeline as well as accepting a past. So I've got some staple events that happened in the past. JFK's assassination, Twin Towers, all the way to Lincoln's assassination, the founding of the country, George Washington and Benjamin Franklin. That leads to the eugenics war in 2353, and 2409 when time travel is actually introduced to the population. All these events are basically their anchor points, my linear timeline. The future's unwritten until I write it. So, and at that point, when I actually start setting anchor point teleportation, self-teleportation, I at this point have come to discover that I'm an immortal, I'm an eternal being, and with that eternal nature, when others see me exit this life, I'm merely bowing off the stage of their life and into another life.